In 1901, sponge divers pulled a corroded lump of bronze from a Greek shipwreck. It sat in a museum drawer for 50 years before anyone realized what it was. Inside, 30 interlocking gears, a handle, Greek inscriptions, a 2,000-year-old computer. Off a tiny Greek island called Antikythera, sponge divers were working 150 feet down. They were looking for sponges. They found a shipwreck. The ship was Roman. It had gone down sometime around 60 BC, older than the Roman Empire itself. Inside it, bronze statues, marble statues, gold jewelry, glassware, amphorae of wine, a hall. The salvage took 2 years. 1 diver died. 2 were paralyzed. Everything that came up went to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The statues got cases. The coins got drawers, and a corroded lump of bronze fused with rotted wood about the size of a shoebox got shoved in a back room. For about a year, nobody touched it. Then it cracked. When the wood casing dried out, the bronze inside split into pieces. Inside those pieces were gears, tiny ones, cut with triangular teeth, sacked in trains, engraved with Greek text. This was a problem. The standard story of ancient Greek engineering, the story still taught in most schools, is that the Greeks were brilliant philosophers, decent astronomers, and mediocre mechanics. They didn't have precision gear cutting. The Romans didn't either. The next time anyone in Europe builds a geared astronomical computer this complex, it's medieval, at least 1,000 years later, and cruder than what came out of that wreck. So when the museum's archaeologists realized they were holding gears from 100 BC, they did what people do when reality contradicts the textbook. They assumed they were wrong about the dating. They weren't. For the next 50 years, scholars argued. Was it an astrolabe? A planetarium? A navigational instrument? A clock? Each guess was wrong, because each guess assumed the device could only do one thing. They were trying to fit a computer into the shape of a tool. In 1951, a Yale physicist named Derek de Solla Price walked into the Athens Museum, looked at the fragments, and proposed something nobody had said out loud yet. He said, "This thing computes." Price spent the next 23 years working it out. In 1971, he X-rayed the fragments, old-school medical X-rays, 2-dimensional, blurry, and he could see, for the first time, that the gear trains were stacked in layers. Not one mechanism, several, working in parallel. In 1974, he published Gears from the Greeks. The central claim, the Antikythera mechanism, was a hand-cranked analog computer that modeled the motion of the sun, the moon, and probably the planets, and it had been built around 100 BC. The reaction in the field was, roughly, no, it wasn't. Price was partly wrong on the details. His gear count was off. His reconstruction missed key trains. But on the central claim, this thing computes, he was right, and it took 30 more years for technology to catch up enough to prove it. In 2005, 2 things happened. A British company called XDEC Systems built a custom X-ray CT scanner, the Blade Runner, capable of imaging the Antikythera fragments in 3 dimensions, slice by slice, down to fractions of a millimeter. They flew it to Athens and aimed it at the bronze. At the same time, Hewlett-Packard sent a team with a technique called polynomial texture mapping. They photographed the surfaces of the fragments under controlled lighting from dozens of angles and stitched the data into images that could be relit virtually. Inscriptions invisible to the naked eye, even invisible under raking light, came out clean. For the first time in 2,000 years, the device was legible. What they found, they published in Nature in 2006, and it broke the textbook. The device has 2 main faces. The front face shows a calendar, 2 concentric rings. The outer ring is the Egyptian solar calendar, 365 days, 12 months. The inner ring is the Greek zodiac. A pointer driven by the gear train moves through the year. As you crank the handle, the sun pointer advances. A separate, slower pointer tracks the moon, and the moon pointer doesn't move at constant speed because the moon doesn't. Here is where it gets strange. The Greeks knew from Hipparchus of Rhodes, working in the 2nd century BC, that the moon doesn't move uniformly across the sky. It speeds up at one part of its orbit and slows at another. The Antikythera mechanism models that. It does it with a piece of mechanical engineering called a pin and slot, one gear with a pin sticking up, sliding through a slot cut into a second gear mounted slightly off-center. As the gears rotate, the slot transmits motion non-uniformly. Speed up, slow down. The moon pointer moves like the moon moves. In bronze, by hand. In 100 BC, that's the front. The back is harder. The upper back dial is a spiral, 5 turns. It tracks the Metonic cycle, the 19-year period after which the lunar and solar calendars resynchronize. Mounted inside it is a smaller dial that tracks the 4-year Olympiad cycle and the engraving lists which Panhellenic games are happening that year. Olympia, Nemea, Isthmia, Pythia. The device knows when the next Olympics are. The lower back dial is also a spiral, 4 turns, and it tracks the Saros eclipse cycle, 18 years and 11 days. At specific positions on this dial, glyphs are engraved. The glyphs say things like moon eclipse, hour 9, red. It predicts eclipses. It predicts what color the moon will turn during the eclipse. It does this for centuries forward and centuries back. Who built it? We don't know. Cicero, writing in the 50s BC, describes a device made by Archimedes, captured during the sack of Syracuse in 212 BC, that modeled the motions of the sun, moon, and planets and could be turned by hand. But Archimedes died more than a century before the Antikythera ships sank, and the device on the wreck shows astronomical models, Hipparchus's lunar theory specifically, that didn't exist in Archimedes' lifetime. So either the device on the wreck is a copy or descendant of an older design tradition, or it represents a school of mechanical astronomy centered on Hipparchus's home island, Rhodes, in the 2nd century BC. The shipwreck's likely route, eastern Aegean toward Italy, fits the Rhodes hypothesis. The cargo also fits high-end Greek goods being exported west, possibly to Roman buyers. Whatever the line of descent, the tradition didn't survive. In 2021, a team led again by Tony Freeth at University College London used updated X-ray tomography data, new readings of the surface inscriptions, and a comprehensive computer model to reconstruct the front-face planetary display, the part of the device that almost everyone since Price had drawn wrong. Their scientific reports paper showed that earlier reconstructions had assumed simpler gearing than the inscriptions actually implied. The corrected model uses a far more sophisticated set of nested gear trains to track all 5 planets visible to the naked eye. We've been misdrawing it for 100 years because the real version was harder to believe. About a third of the surface inscriptions are still unreadable. Corrosion took them. There are gear stubs in the fragments that don't connect to anything we currently understand. There may be functions on this device we haven't recovered yet. Here's the part that should bother you. If the Antikythera mechanism existed, it wasn't built in a vacuum. Devices this complex don't appear once. Somebody had to design the gears. Somebody had to teach the gear cutter. There were almost certainly other machines like it, earlier prototypes, contemporary copies, later refinements. We have none of them. Not a fragment, not a reference, not a drawing. The next geared astronomical computer in the European record is more than 1,000 years later, and it is less precise. So either this device is a freak artifact, the only one of its kind, surviving only because a Roman ship sank in deep enough water to seal it from atmosphere for 2,000 years, or there was an entire technical tradition, and we have lost every single other piece of it. Both options should make you uncomfortable. A device this advanced, sitting in a Greek museum drawer for 50 years before anyone realized what it was, it is hard not to wonder what else is sitting somewhere right now, in a back room, mislabeled.